It is Mock Draft Monday here on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight. We've got an hour. Let's roll. 4 teams with multiple picks, 4 teams without any picks. The Raiders with 1 pick, but it's the big one at number 1. We're going to be going through Josh Edwards' mock draft. You can find the whole thing at cbssports.com. We're going to hit every one here in the first round. I'm Chris Hassel, also joined by Ryan Wilson from the With the First Pick podcast. And at number 1, second straight week, Josh, that I've looked at the odds to go number 1, and Fernando Mendoza is minus 7,000. It is not moving.
Yeah, I would imagine when Clint Kubiak sat down with the Raiders and going over that roster, he was excited about Ashton Jeanty. He was excited about Brock Bowers, but he wanted to know what the plan was at quarterback. And I tend to think that he probably took this job with the expectation that they're going to take Fernando Mendoza, the Indiana quarterback, at number 1 overall, because that job just is not as appealing if you don't have a quarterback in place. And Mendoza is a guy that has been incredibly accurate. He showed that he can rise to the occasion and deliver on the big stages through the college football playoffs. So if you're trying to instill this new culture with the Raiders, I think Mendoza is a great place to start.
All right, so Mendoza is going to go number 1 to the Vegas Raiders, barring some kind of crazy circumstance here and a change at number 1 that we haven't seen in quite some time. At number 2, it's our first team with multiple picks in the first round. It's the New York Jets, and David Bailey is the pick here from Josh. Ryan, it fills a need, right? Because, I mean, you traded away your 2 biggest stars on defense at the deadline last year in Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a little zig when everyone else has been zagging by Josh. And I sort of like it because Arvell Reese has been penciled in at number 2 because of the versatility and the way he played for Ohio State in 2025. But David Bailey may not be far behind, and he may actually be ahead. He transferred from Stanford after the 2024 season. I thought he was pretty good at Stanford, but he was a situational player. And then he went to Texas Tech, and he just took over. And our buddy Rand Carthon likes to make fun of him because he doesn't wear sweatbands or gloves or anything other than the uniform provided to him by the team, and he just goes out there and absolutely dominates. He might have been the best player on the field in that playoff loss to Oregon on both sides of the ball. He kept them in that game as much as he could, and I think he has certainly solidified himself as a top 10 pick. And if you told me he went number 2, it would make all the sense in the world for the reasons you're talking about, Chris. They need help everywhere, and if you're not going to take a quarterback here, get the best player, and on a lot of people's boards, David Bailey is certainly going to be up there. And
quarterbacks, might only see one of them go in the first round of the NFL draft. We had 2 go in last week's mock draft. We'll see if Ty Simpson gets in here on this one. The Jets also have the 16th overall pick, so maybe a chance to get Simpson there. At number 3, Josh, it's the Arizona Cardinals, and you think that they could potentially consider trading down from here, but if they don't, who do you have them taking?
I have them taking Spencer Fano, the offensive tackle from Utah, and to Ryan's larger point, this is a draft class where you could say that David Bailey goes number 2 overall. You could say he goes number 10 overall. I would not be surprised either way. I'm not real convicted beyond the positional value of quarterback at number 1 overall. So I could see this being a very volatile draft class and be filled with a lot of surprises. But Fano is a player that steps in, fills a need for the Cardinals one way or another. If you view him as a right tackle, which I think he can do, then you're losing Jonah Williams, your starting right tackle, to free agency, but he could also slide into guard if you were to retain Jonah Williams. So he's a path to getting the 5 best offensive linemen on the football field. And if you were to do that, then suddenly you can focus on the quarterback position and what you're going to do there moving forward.
Mike LaFleur, the new head coach coming over from L.A., where he was the offensive coordinator and, of course, has that famous brother, head coach of the Green Bay Packers. Let's go to the Titans at 4. New head coach Robert Saleh, though he is not new to head coaching. We, of course, remember him with the Jets, but getting a second crack at it here. Ryan, Josh has the Titans going linebacker here in Arvell Reese, who you think could go number 2.
Yeah, this is Robert Saleh's Fred Warner from a year ago in terms of the versatile playmaker that you can virtually line up anywhere. Arvell's going to be listed as a linebacker on some teams' boards. He'll be listed as an edge rusher on other teams, and he's going to draw comparisons, fair or not, to Abdul Carter and Micah Parsons, both coming out of Penn State, because of the versatility those players played with in college. He's built a little differently, a little more lithe of frame, but just absolutely explosive. And if you're the Titans, when you're a bad football team, you could draft offensive line, you could go wide receiver here, you go any number of directions, but there are worse ways to rebuild this defense than Arvell Reese lining up alongside the likes of Devondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons, who have been a few of the bright spots on defense for Tennessee.
All right, so let's round out the top five with another team with a new head coach. It's John Harbaugh in New York with the Giants. Josh, how would Carnell Tate pair with Malik Nabers?
Yeah, sounds pretty good. And if you're Ohio State, you're keeping alive the streak of first-round wide receivers there, and presumably next year as well with Jeremiah Smith. So Carnell Tate is a bigger body. He's somebody that would complement Malik Nabers well. Nabers, of course, is a very well-rounded skill set. So you're able to move those guys around the formation a little bit and really maximize their skill set. But Tate is a player that really elevated his game this season alongside Jeremiah Smith. And now that you have potentially Wan'Dale Robinson leaving in free agency, as well as Nabers coming off a pretty significant injury, this is a team that could be leaning on Tate very early in the second year of Jackson Dart's career there with the Giants, and the first year with new head coach John Harbaugh.
Josh, we allowed you to make trades in this mock draft, and he is making a trade at number 6. This pick, the Browns trading to the Cowboys, as the Cowboys move up, Ryan, from number 12, and they send their pick to the Browns, as well as a couple of future second-rounders for Caleb Downs. What do you think about that?
So, Chris, Josh is a Browns fan, and he is trying to focus his inner Andrew Berry and just trade down as much as possible and get as many first-round picks out of it. Here's the thing I'll say about this pick. My initial reaction was, okay, do we want to move up 6 spots to get a safety? My second reaction was this, Chris. I've compared Caleb Downs to a version of Troy Polamalu. Back in 2003, the Steelers trade up 11 spots to get him in the middle of the first round. He is, as we all know, Hall of Famer. And if you're getting 60% of Troy Polamalu, he's a top 10 pick. Look, the Cowboys aren't one player away, but they have a ton of draft picks. You talked about those guys that the Jets traded. Quentin Williams was one of them. They traded to Dallas. They got some picks for Micah Parsons. They're going to have some picks in the next draft as well. I'm okay with this because they have still their other first-round pick here, and Caleb Downs, if he is as special as he seems to be, this is a great step in the right direction for that defense in Dallas.
Yeah, they keep that 20th overall pick as well in this mock trade as they swap first-round picks here. The Browns will pick at 12. At number 7, it's the Commanders, Josh, and it's a defense that is aging. Players like Bobby Wagner, who's about to become a free agent. Rueben Bain Jr. is the pick. Why?
Well, edge rusher is a big need for the Commanders, first and foremost. This is a team that has really gone with some veterans to fill positions along their defense. Linebacker Bobby Wagner. Some of those guys have already moved on. Some of them will continue to move on this offseason. I look at Dan Quinn and what he wants to do on the defensive side of the ball. He's traditionally favored those long, lengthy pass rushers that can leverage opponents, but Rueben Bain kind of checks the box as being this powerful run-setting type. So although he doesn't possess the length that Quinn is typically drawn towards, I do think this player is going to endear himself to Quinn because of the power with which he plays, as well as his ability to uplift the run defense for Washington, which is something that has really plagued them early the past couple of years.
All right, we're going through Josh Edwards' mock. We're on number 8. The Saints. And Ryan, it is the 4th Ohio State Buckeye in the first 8 picks in linebacker Sonny Styles.
Yeah, and he deserves to be a top 10 pick given the way he played. If you watched him in 2024, he moved from safety down to linebacker, and in 2024 it looked like he was still feeling out the position of linebacker and how to play it. 2025, things started to come together for him, and the athleticism met the instincts and the football IQ playing a new position, and he was absolutely lights out. Unfortunately, we didn't talk as much about him because he played alongside Arvell and Caleb. I like this pick. Demario Davis's contract's up. He's a veteran, of course, been playing for the Saints forever. The only question I have is if you're Tyler Shough and Kellen Moore, do you want to help out your young quarterback with Jeremiyah Love here? But there are worse consolation prizes than getting Sonny Styles here as a top 10 pick.
This would tie a record for picks in the top 10 from one school. The record is 4 in the top 10. This would be top 8 in Reese, Tate, Downs, and Styles out of Ohio State. We had that mock trade with the Cowboys moving up from 12 up to 6 to get Caleb Downs. It would be the first time that a safety goes top 10 since Jamal Adams 9 years ago. All right, no Jeremiyah Love yet, but a bunch of interesting teams coming up that might be in need of a running back, like, say, the Chiefs. Continuing here on HQ Spotlight with our Mock Draft Monday, Josh Edwards bringing his first-round NFL mock to us. We are through the first 8. We've not had a running back yet, but that changes with the Chiefs at 9. And Josh, the Chiefs have not had a 1,000-yard rusher since Patrick Mahomes has been the starter.
Yeah, and I've gone back and forth about this pick as well, because this is a team that took Clyde Edwards-Helaire not too long ago, and it did not fare well. But Jeremiyah Love from Notre Dame is somebody that brings a different dynamic to that offense. He's a player that runs a little bit more upright, but he lands in an ideal situation because I think Kansas City already has a really established offensive line, especially if rookie Josh Simmons returns to that team. I think he was playing pretty good football this past year when he was available. Kingsley Suamataia had filled in at the guard position, and on the right side, you feel a lot more comfortable. So if you put Love behind that offensive line and allow Andy Reid to move him around the formation, create mismatches in space, because this is a player that has running back listed next to his name, but he's also a tremendous pass catcher. So if you're able to move him around the formation, that's going to open up things for Xavier Worthy and some of those other pass catchers in the Kansas City offense.
It would be the third time in 4 years that a running back goes in the top 10. At number 10, Ryan, the Bengals are up, and this would be the first time a cornerback goes in the top 10 in the last 3 drafts.
This is worst case scenario for the Bengals, and this has nothing to do with Mansoor Delane, who is my CB1. It has everything to do with that. The 3 best edge rushers are long gone, and that is a glaring weakness for this Bengals team. Mansoor Delane will certainly help that secondary. Unfortunately, he can't rush the passer as well. Part of me wonders if you're trying to trade down. Part of me wonders, do you think about Keldric Faulk here? The issue with Keldric Faulk, the edge rusher, is that he's going to bring back a lot of memories of Shamar Stewart, from a year ago, who was long on athleticism, short on production. Keldric's a little younger, so that perhaps is not a fair comparison. And the other thing is, I'm thinking T.J. Parker here. Do I take him top 10? He reminds me a little bit of Jared Verse, and Jared Verse probably is a top 10 pick in any redraft you do. But Mansoor Delane is a shutdown corner. He's incredibly physical, transferred from Virginia Tech, and even got better against SEC competition. So he is going to be a top 15 pick. I think the Bengals will love to get edge rush help here, but unfortunately for them, the top 3 guys are off the board.
All right, let's move on to a team that's been in the news today, the Miami Dolphins releasing Tyreek Hill. This mock draft, Josh, was done before that news came out. Would you change anything at all here with this pick now that we know Tyreek Hill is gone?
I probably would have if a Carnell Tate or someone like that was still available. Probably not with Makai Lemon, maybe a Jordyn Tyson here for the Dolphins, but they released just about everybody, and cornerback remains a need for that franchise as well. So I have them taking Jermod McCoy, the cornerback from Tennessee, who is one of my favorite prospects in this draft class. He did not play this past season due to injury, but this is a player that excels in man coverage, zone coverage. You just put him out there, and he's going to be able to shut down his half of the field, and that's what Miami has been missing the last couple of years. So cornerback was a need for that franchise going into the year. They were able to fill that production adequately, but most of those players were veterans that they brought in and are now moving on to free agency. So you get a guy like McCoy who should have fresh legs coming off the injury, as well as a tremendous ceiling at the cornerback position. I think this is somebody that can turn over offenses in the back end of your defense.
All right, I mentioned we're allowing trades in this mock draft, so we did have that mock trade. The Browns moving down from 6 to 12 as the Cowboys went up and got Caleb down. So, Ryan, here the Browns are getting Shedeur Sanders, a pretty nice weapon, in Jordyn Tyson.
Yeah, and this is a huge need, right? Because you have Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, the tight end, is probably going to hit free agency, and you're not going to take a tight end, for example, this high in Kenyon Sadiq, if that were someone you were targeting. But my only issue with Jordyn Tyson has nothing to do with the on-field production, because he can take over football games at all three levels. He's thick. He can run through arm tackles. He can separate down the field. It's the injury concerns. He had an ACL, PCL, MCL in 2022, so he missed time there. Had a collarbone concern last season in 2024. And then last year he missed some time with some soft tissue stuff. So that's the part that you have to figure out, the medicals, because right now he is not my wide receiver 1 or 2 or even 3. And that's why. If he is healthy, then I get it. It makes a ton of sense. I think he would have an easy transition to playing anywhere. I don't think the weather's going to be an issue for him, even though he's played mostly at Arizona State. The only thing for me is the injuries. Like, does Denzel Boston make more sense as a big target opposite someone like Jerry Jeudy? Does Makai Lemon make more sense? Because we know he can play anywhere. He has returnability, and he reminds me a little bit of Amon-Ra St. Brown. So those are the things you have to sort through. You are getting that extra draft pick in this trade down scenario, and you got one more draft pick to help out presumably your offense, because that defense by itself was good for 95% of the wins that the Browns had last year.
You have the 24th overall pick coming up as well, and in this mock trade, 2 future second-round picks. Let's move to 13, and Josh, it's the first playoff team with a draft pick. Who do you have the Rams taking with their first of 2 here in the first round?
I have them taking Miami offensive tackle Francis Mauigoa, who is a little bit more of a need, depending on how you look at it now that Rob Havenstein, the longtime Ram, has announced his retirement. He didn't play much this past year. They had Warren McClendon in there at right tackle, and he did fine at the position. But I wonder if this is a team that's going to continue moving forward with Matthew Stafford as your quarterback. Are you comfortable with that situation moving forward? Now you have Mauigoa, who's able to come in and man that right tackle position. I think that's a situation that Los Angeles would be hard-pressed to pass with 2 first-round picks here and another one coming up in the back end of the first round. I think they're able to address a need here and still able to get a really good player here later in the first round.
And Rams also have the 29th overall pick in this year's draft, 2 first-rounders. As we move on to the Baltimore Ravens, Ryan, this is an interior offensive lineman, and our number 1, or at least your number 1 ranked interior offensive lineman in this class, in Vega Ioane.
Absolutely, and he is going to be a first-round pick. After that, things will get a little interesting in terms of the interior offensive line. We'll have some more offensive tackles going round 1. And you could argue for the Ravens, they could go defensive line or offensive line, because there are needs both places, primarily in the interior, although edge rush is also going to be a consideration for the Ravens. Here's the thing about Vega Ioane. You're going to pencil him in, and he's going to start for 10 years, and you don't have to worry about it. This is not something that will keep Eric DeCosta, the GM, up at night after that first-round selection. There are other concerns they need to sort through. Personnel-wise, this is not one of them. So perhaps maybe you would like Caleb Banks here, the defensive lineman out of Florida. There are injury issues there, or maybe even Kayden McDonald at Ohio State. Can he be a NFL pass rusher? That's a question as well. There are no concerns with Vega Ioane. When he's on the field, he has been absolutely dominant, and that is a first step to helping get that offense where it needs to be, which wasn't the case last season for Lamar Jackson and company, now with new head coach Jesse Minter.
All right, nearly halfway through our first-round mock here from Josh Edwards. You can find the full thing at CBSSports.com. We did have that mock trade with the Cowboys going up to get Caleb Downs at number 6. The Browns getting a couple future second-round picks, and their first pick of the first round, their first of 2, Jordyn Tyson, the wide receiver out of Arizona State. Much more coming up. Back here on HQ Spotlight as we continue our mock draft from Josh Edwards. Ryan Wilson is here as well. I'm Chris Hassel taking you through it. To number 15, the Tampa Bay Bucks. Josh, you have them going with a 20-year-old.
Yeah, and if I was Tampa Bay, I would love for Ohio State linebacker Sonny Styles to be here, but he isn't. So I went in another direction with Auburn pass rusher Keldric Faulk, a player who Ryan spoke about a little bit earlier. He's somebody that has tremendous length. He looks the part. of an NFL pass rusher, but the production just has not been there, much in the same way as we discussed with Shamar Stewart a year ago. But this is a player that, as you noted, Chris, is incredibly young. He's somebody that still has his best football ahead of him in theory, and Tampa Bay is a team that has historically been drawn to that length at the position. You had Logan Hall there, of course, in the past. Now you get Keldric Faulk, who is somebody that may be a little bit of an unfinished product, somebody that's a little raw coming out of Auburn, but also somebody that uplifts your run defense immediately and offers you a little bit of promise moving forward to potentially impact that pass rush positively in the future.
As we hit the halfway mark, our first team up for a second time, it's the New York Jets. Ryan, Josh had them taking David Bailey, edge rusher, second overall. How about adding another defensive lineman in Peter Woods out of Clemson?
Interestingly, Chris, no Ty Simpson here. So the Jets are going to pass on that. And part of me wonders, at least for the exercise we're doing here, if you get some Zach Wilson type cold feet. You don't want to pass on really good football players on the chance that the quarterback works out. And this isn't just about Zach Wilson. Quarterbacks in the first round work out less than half the time. So I understand that. David Bailey feels like a layup. And if you get Peter Woods here, that feels pretty good too. This is sort of the Seattle Seahawks blueprint. Let's make everyone along the front seven absolutely dominant, and we'll figure out the rest of the stuff as we get through the draft and free agency. My only concern, Chris, is that Garrett Wilson has been begging for wide receiver help, and Makai Lemon is staring them in the face. And if Rick Spielman doesn't convince his colleagues to take a wide receiver here, there could be riots out there in New York. So that's my only issue. I love Peter Woods. He's still top 5 on my board, so I get that part of it. But I do wonder about the wide receiver aspect for Garrett Wilson and for Jets fans that are tired of seeing guys not named Garrett Wilson try to run routes.
We saw 4 Ohio State players go in the first 8 picks, 3 of them back to back to back. Here at 16 and 17, Josh, you have a couple Clemson Tigers going back to back.
I do. And to the Lions, I have cornerback Avieon Terrell, who is the younger brother of Falcons cornerback A.J. Terrell. And I think back a couple of years ago where Detroit took a couple of cornerbacks early in the draft with Ennis Rakestraw and Terrion Arnold. Arnold has struggled a little bit to stay healthy. Rakestraw, similarly, just has not been on the field. They went out, they got DJ Reed in free agency. They brought in Amik Robinson. Some of those guys are now hitting free agency. So cornerback is once a need for this organization. And Terrell, to me, is one of the better prospects at the position in this draft class. As I noted, he's, of course, got the pedigree with his brother having played in the NFL. So this is a player that's going to help that defense on the back end. They also need pass rush help. So if they can identify that, bring in a productive player, that's going to make life much easier on Terrell and some of those other talented defensive backs in the Lions secondary.
All right, let's move to 18, same division, Minnesota Vikings. And Ryan, it's a pick here that I didn't see this name in your latest first-round mock draft. What do you think of Florida's Caleb Banks, the defensive lineman, going to Minnesota?
Love him. And, Chris, the thing is, he was injured for much of the season, had a foot injury, played late in the year, played early in the year. Then he went to the Senior Bowl, practiced all 3 days, and was dominant all 3 days. He's a legit 6'6", 330, has 35-inch arms. Brian Flores will love having him in the middle of that defense. We just talked about Seattle and how they built their defense. We know what Brian Flores can do with the unit that they have there. The thing is, they signed some free agents, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, that didn't quite work out. Jalen Reven's probably their best interior defensive lineman. Caleb Banks, when healthy, can take over football games. There are a lot of guys in this class along the defensive line that are really good against the run, but aren't necessarily stalwarts as pass rushers. Caleb checks both boxes, and he's the guy that you let get off the bus first to send a message to the rest of the team that you're about to face.
But he wasn't the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. Cassius Howell out of Texas A&M. He comes up next for the Carolina Panthers. Josh, why do you think he has some juice that pass rush has been missing?
Well, I think we just saw it this past year. A one-time MAC transfer, he comes over and he was just immediately productive for that team. Last year, Carolina, they took 2 edge rushers fairly early in the draft with Nick Scorton and Princely Umanmielen. Umanmielen was more of a role player by season's end, but I really thought that Scorton had developed to at least raise the floor as a run defender, and then he was also giving them production as a pass rusher as well. So now you get a guy like Howell, who may not be traditionally sized, but somebody that's a little bit quicker. He's got a little more juice. Now if you can get those 2 players, those 2 young players working together, to rush the quarterback. Maybe you'll be able to finally get out of the basement as being one of the league's worst pass rushes and really affect the opposing quarterback. And maybe that is the catalyst to change for this Carolina team that finished the season so strongly in 2025.
Yeah, we're in the area of playoff teams now from a season ago, though the Cowboys have this next pick at number 20. They've been busy in this draft. Josh had them moving up to number 6 to get safety Caleb Downs. Ryan, what do you think of the haul here as he has him going with linebacker C.J. Allen out of Georgia at number 20?
We're not talking enough about C.J. Allen. We talk a lot of times about Arvell Reese and, of course, Sonny Styles, his team at Ohio State. C.J. Allen was a really good football player in 2024, even better in my mind in 2025. I think he has first-round traits, and I think he fills a huge need in Dallas. DeMarvion Overshown is as athletic and off-ball linebacker as you can find. He just struggles to stay healthy. They need help at every single level of this defense in Dallas. You hit the home run with Caleb Downs earlier in the round when you traded up. Now you're at the second level with an incredibly athletic C.J. Allen, who can play the run like he's old school Ray Lewis, and he moves in space like every sort of athletic off-ball linebacker does these days. You have Quinnen Williams, who you traded for, now anchoring the center of that defense. Maybe you need some edge rush help that you can think about. Donovan Ezraku played at a high level, a second-round pick last year. But this all makes sense if you're trying to get better on defense, even the cost of trading up for Caleb Downs, because I think he has a chance to be truly special. The other thing is we know the offense can score points, and we'll figure out what they do with George Pickens, but it sounds like he will be back. So if you can just limit the other team to 7 or 8 fewer points, you're going to be in that many more football games, and they're going to have a legit chance to be in the mix for this division title if this defense comes together. Only 2 wide receivers off the board to this point. Just 1 running back in Jeremiyah Love. Just 1 quarterback in Fernando Mendoza, number 1 overall. Maybe we get a quarterback coming up next because the Steelers are coming. The Jets had their 2 picks. No quarterback out of them in Josh Edwards' mock draft. But coming up, does Ty Simpson go 21 to the Steelers, or perhaps they go wide receiver to pair with DK Metcalf in Pittsburgh? Back here on HQ's Spotlight, Josh Edwards has his mock draft, and we are at number 21. Ty Simpson is still out there. The Steelers are up. Ryan Wilson is here. He was wondering if maybe the Jets would go for Ty Simpson with one of their top 20 picks. The Steelers, though, not going quarterback either. Makai Lemon is the pick, Josh.
Yeah, I have them taking a wide receiver because, let's be honest, we all know where the situation in Pittsburgh is headed, and that is with Aaron Rodgers back in the fold alongside Mike McCarthy, whether Ryan wants to admit it or not. Look, I'm here trying to be a good friend of Ryan, give him a very talented wide receiver to pair with DK Metcalf. He's been giving me grief about it this whole time, but Makai Lemon is a player that is grounded through the catch. He's somebody that would excel in today's NFL, where if you just put the ball in his hands and give him room to operate, he's somebody that can create a lot of yards after the catch, which is something this Pittsburgh offense has desperately needed. So if you put him in that offense now with DK Metcalf, who of course has the speed and the physicality to stretch defenses vertically, I don't know how the quarterback situation is going to work there, but I do feel good about the players that player will be throwing to.
And that probably tells us only 1 quarterback in this first round, because a lot of the rest of these teams aren't quarterback needy. Chargers definitely not quarterback needy. They have Justin Herbert, but got to get some protection, got to stay healthy. What do you think of the pick at 22 of an interior offensive lineman out of Texas A&M, Ryan?
Yeah, Chase Bisontis is an interesting player. I'm not as high on him as some other folks, but the need is obvious for the Chargers. So I understand what Josh is doing here. Ideally, Vega Ioane would be here, but he's going to be long gone in real life, just like he was in this mock draft here. You have to solidify the interior offensive line, and there's no doubt about it. Whether you're talking about Zion Johnson, whose 5th-year option the Chargers chose not to pick up before last season, or even center, which Chargers fans will tell you loud, clear, and repeatedly that is also a need. So I get what we're doing here in terms of the player fit. I may have gone in another direction, but that's a conversation we can have over the next 60 whatever days until the actual draft. Alternatively, you might consider interior defensive line here, maybe even edge rush. Odafe always deals up. They traded for him, and he was absolutely dominant as a situational pass rusher the second half of the season. But we saw what that game looked like in the playoffs in New England, and I think Justin Herbert probably still has nightmares. So fix the offensive line. We can circle back and worry about the other stuff that I mentioned later.
All right, up next, the Philadelphia Eagles, potentially in need of multiple offensive linemen this offseason because guys are getting up there, maybe thinking about retirement. Josh, why does Kadyn Proctor fill maybe one or even two holes there?
Yeah, well, we've all heard the rumblings that Lane Johnson could retire. We've heard the rumblings that perhaps Landon Dickerson will walk away from the game. Kadyn Proctor is somebody that gives you the flexibility to cover both of those or either of those, I should say, if either were to happen, because he is somebody that has played left tackle at Alabama, but some project him inside to guard. So you get a little bit of flexibility that Howie Roseman has typically looked for in his offensive linemen in the pick of Kadyn Proctor. He's somebody that is able to get out in space despite his massive size and engage blocks in space. This is a team that is doing some soul searching this off season. Of course, A.J. Brown is going to be the hot topic where he ultimately is playing next season. But the offensive line, given everything that we've heard, now that Jeff Stoutland has also announced that he's not returning to the franchise, there's a lot of questions among that unit. And to get a guy like Proctor going back to Roseman's roots of investing in the trenches, I think that gives you a little bit of insurance in the event that either of those two players walk away.
A guy that we saw many times on offense as well, even catching a pass for Alabama last season. Let's move to the Cleveland Browns, who are up once again at number 24. Ryan, Josh gave Shedeur Sanders some help at wide receiver a little bit earlier in Jordyn Tyson. How about some help up front with Monroe Freeling?
And an extra draft pick or two in that trade down scenario as well.
Right.
So they're moving and shaking, and this is best case scenario for Todd Monken and Shedeur Sanders, specifically for Shedeur Sanders taking the next step in year two. Monroe Freeling is a really fun player to watch. He was just scratching the surface, played left tackle at Georgia. The issue is where are you going to play him in Cleveland? DeJuan Jones played left tackle last year before the injury, but DeJuan can play on the right side, and so can Monroe. He's taken snaps in 2024 and 23 on the right side at times. So you have that versatility. The bottom line is the offensive line was getting old. Several of those guys are out of contract. It had to be replenished, and this is a good first step in doing that. And you've added to the wide receiver room. And as I mentioned earlier, if Jordyn Tyson stays healthy, suddenly this offense is taking shape because you have the run game coming together when everyone's healthy there. Then the question becomes, what does Shedeur Sanders do with it in year two? And what does that look like with Todd Monken now dialing up the plays?
And with that mock trade a little bit earlier, again, a reminder, they moved down from 6 to 12 with the Dallas Cowboys moving up to get Caleb Downs. They get 2 future second-round picks in that mock draft. Those are the picks that Ryan was referencing. Chicago Bears up at 25. Josh, the Bears didn't have much of a pass rush, but they were also suspect against the run at times last season.
Yeah, so I gave them Ohio State, again, another Buckeye. Ohio State defensive tackle Kayden McDonald, somebody that will immediately impact the run defense for the better. Ryan mentioned him earlier as a possibility for the Ravens. And the reason that I don't have him going a little bit higher is because I do have questions about how much pass rush potential he's going to bring to the field. And I think you really need that to be somebody that's considered in the top half of the first round. Although I would have said the same thing about Kenneth Grant a year ago, and he was taken early by the Dolphins as well. So this is the range that we saw Tyleik Williams go last year to the Lions, somebody that is more of a predominant run defender. So if you're able to impact the game in that manner, but also apply a little bit of pass rush, you're talking about an ideal situation for this Chicago defense, which was not stingy at all in the playoffs and needs to be addressed this offseason.
5th Buckeye off the board after 4 went in the top 8. Buffalo Bills up at 26. And Ryan, to me, this one makes too much sense from Josh. It's Indiana wide receiver Omar Cooper getting Josh Allen a much-needed weapon on the outside.
Yeah, Omar's another guy that we're not talking enough about somehow. I talked to Kalen Black, the running back out of Indiana, about Omar specifically back at the Senior Bowl, and he said his ability to contort his body is something he has never seen in person, and it showed up consistently week in and week out. We saw it in that last-second win over Penn State, the great throw by Fernando Mendoza, the even better catch by Omar Cooper Jr. in the back of the end zone. And I'll just say this about the Buffalo Bills. We know how awkward that press conference was and that post-Sean McDermott firing, where we saw Brandon Beane having to sit next to the owner as the owner owner said some things that Brandon appeared to not agree with. And also, by the way, Brandon got that promotion. If instead the Bills had drafted Omar Cooper Jr. on draft night and then announced that Brandon Beane was getting promotion, there would have been a parade in his honor in Buffalo the following day. So timing is everything, right? Because as we sit here, Brandon Cooks' contract's up, Gabe Davis's contract's up. Keon Coleman has been a disappointment, as Terry Pagula explained to us in that aforementioned press conference. You have Josh Palmer, and then you have Tyrell Shavers, who tore his ACL in the playoffs. And then there's Khalil Shakir. Omar Cooper Jr., it will be a starter on day one, and he will be a difference maker on day one, and it will make Joe Brady's job eminently easier because Joe Brady is also under a ton of pressure to make this thing work after they fired a guy who went 90 and 50, essentially, in Sean McDermott and turned things around overnight in Buffalo. Obviously, they moved on from Sean, and now they have to fix that offensive wide receiver room, and Omar Cooper Jr. feels like the easiest layup you could ever imagine for Brandon Beane and company.
Yeah, they don't draft wide receivers in the first round or often in the first 2 days of the NFL draft. Just one wide receiver taken in the first 3 rounds of the draft by Buffalo in the Josh Allen era. But right after them, Josh Edwards, it's another team in the 49ers that has a bunch of needs at wide receiver.
Yeah, and we do have another wide receiver coming off the board here in the form of Denzel Boston from Washington, somebody that has a little bit of size that they can add to that room. Jawan Jennings is currently slated to hit free agency. Whether he actually reaches that point remains to be seen. But a couple of years ago, it was funny because the 49ers took Ricky Pearsall on draft night, and everybody was thinking, why would they take a wide receiver when they are so talented and deep at the wide receiver position? And then over the past couple of years, we've seen the fallout with Deebo Samuel, of course, being traded to Washington, and the ongoing circumstances with Brandon Ayuk playing out there now as well. So if Jennings is gone, then the cupboard looks very bare. You bring back Pearsall, and now you've got Denzel Boston, who allows you to have some of that size. But he's not going to be the last wide receiver taken in the first round either.
He is the 5th wide receiver taken in this mock draft, right after Omar Cooper Jr. Makai Lemon goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but as Josh hinted, he won't be the last wide receiver off the board. There's a speedy one that's out there. There's also a tight end out there. We haven't seen one of them be drafted in this mock draft yet. Handful of teams left as we round out the first round mock. Rounding out our first round mock draft from Josh Edwards, Ryan Wilson is here. I'm Chris Hassel. We are up to the Houston Texans at number 28. Ryan, all offseason spent on revamping, really overhauling that offensive line, but still a lot of pieces to move around here, and it's an offensive line pick here in Caleb Lomu.
Yeah, Caleb Lomu is a really good football player. Played left tackle at Utah. He was so good, in fact, that they moved Spencer Fano, who went earlier in this draft, from the left side to the right side. He needs to get functionally stronger, but there's a lot of good tape of him doing a lot of really good things in both pass protection and the run game. And you talked about it, Chris. The Texans have huge needs along the offensive line. Perhaps the biggest need is the person that lines up behind the offensive line, and C.J. Stroud, the quarterback. They have to figure that out and figure out what's gone awry from the 2023 rookie season, where he was so good, because the last 2 years have been less consistent in that sense. And certainly the loss to New England was very troubling with all the turnovers. But I think if you fix the offensive line, any quarterback will tell you having more time to make decisions behind the pocket makes their life easier. They need some interior offensive line help too, so I don't know if Lomu would kick inside for a year or two, but you can never have enough athletic offensive linemen at your disposal. If they wanted to go in another direction, and this would be tougher in this mock draft, defensive line would too, but a lot of those guys are already off the board.
All right, so some protection for the young, struggling quarterback. How about the LA Rams, who have the old first-time MVP quarterback in Matthew Stafford? And Josh, the big knock, at least Pete Prisco would say it every week, and why he wouldn't pick the Rams to win the NFC or win the Super Bowl, is they just didn't have enough speed offensively. You're looking to change that.
Yeah, no question any longer now with KC Concepcion, the wide receiver from Texas A&M, going to Los Angeles. Just a year ago, this is a team that went out and they got Devontae Adams to pair with Puka Nacua, and we really saw that vision come to fruition on the field this fall. But Adams is going to be 33 years old, and the team really doesn't have anybody else in the building that's going to be able to take some of that pressure off of Puka Nacua. So you get a guy like Concepcion who has great speed. He's incredibly fluid. I think there was actually some moments left on the field this past year where there were some errant quarterback throws that, would have allowed his production to be even higher this past season for the Aggies. So you put him in that offense now, getting passes from Matthew Stafford in a Sean McVay offense. This is a player that's going to be an impact player immediately for the Los Angeles Rams.
All right, let's move to the Denver Broncos at 30, and Sean Payton started his career and he had Jimmy Graham, and you were thinking his entire career he's going to be working these tight ends. It hasn't really worked out that way of late. It didn't work with Evan Ingram last year. Ryan, what do you think of them getting Oregon tight end Kenyon Sadiq?
Yeah, he is the upgraded version of what Evan Ingram was supposed to be. A much better blocker coming out of college, no doubt about it. He's a little thicker as well, probably 15 to 20 pounds. He didn't have the season in 2025 that he had in 2024, but we know he can do it because we saw it in 2024. And his tape is still filled with enough highlights to get you really excited, especially in an offense where we know Sean Payton can take advantage of athletic tight ends. You can see it here, hurdling Penn State players when they virtually had nothing to do with it. He can block, as I mentioned, in line. He can play in the slot. He's used in special teams. He will line up at quarterback. So he provides certainly more than just your inline tight end that you're used to watching from 20 years ago. The versatility makes him intriguing, and he would probably be one of the fastest guys on that team, not named Marvin Mims, the wide receiver position, which is also intriguing as they look to get faster down the field.
Up to the Super Bowl teams. That's all we have left here in our mock draft, and it's the team that lost the Super Bowl. And one of the reasons the Patriots lost the Super Bowl, Josh, is they could not protect Drake May, sacked 6 times.
So last offseason, they went out, they got Morgan Moses, the veteran to play right tackle for them. I'm having them take Max Iannaccio, the right tackle out of Arizona State, in this draft because I think he's incredibly powerful. He moves well for his size. I think he's better technically than what he's been given credit for. But Moses was adequate for them this past year. It seems like everywhere that he has been signed, he gives them adequate level play, and then he moves on. It's like his watch is over. He can now turn it over to a younger player, and that's exactly what's happening here with Iannaccio, who I think is somebody that is going to be a staple at right tackle for them immediately.
That leaves the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks, who are going to have some guys that they're going to need to pay unless they go young and get a little bit cheaper. And Ryan, they have a couple cornerbacks hitting free agency.
Yeah, including Tariq Woolen, who I think they're going to let walk. So instead, they draft Colton Hood out of Tennessee. He was the other cornerback, quotation marks, coming into the season with Jermod McCoy. He had a fantastic rookie season. Big, strong, physical, can play outside. He feels exactly what Mike McDonald looks for in those defensive backs. You pair him with Devin Witherspoon, the Nicky Manwari, the second-round pick from a year ago, in front of them, and you continue to cook with gas. You're not suddenly cooking with gas. You keep doing what you've been doing defensively, and then they can worry about the other side of the ball throughout the rest of the draft, perhaps trying to find a replacement for Ken Walker III, should that be something that they need to do.
Okay, that's our first round mock from Josh Edwards. You can find the article at CBSSports.com. KC Concepcion, the 6th wide receiver taken in the first round, just one tight end, Kenyon Sadiq, 30th to the Broncos. Our takeaways from the mock coming up next.